So to discuss this, these comments and reactions, we are joined in by Vivek Mishra, who's a Deputy Director, Strategic Studies Program at ORF, along with Raymond Vickery, the former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce, Trade and Development. Gentlemen, welcome to ET Now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's just begin with you, Raymond Vickery. As a former Assistant Secretary of Commerce who has played a key role in the India-US commercial alliances and the India-US civil nuclear initiative, what is going on really, if you can give us an understanding of the situation? Because Lutnick said that, had Prime Minister Modi made a phone call, had he spoken to President Trump, then this trade deal would have been signed, would have gone through. So what is going on? Because just a couple of weeks ago, there was a tweet from Donald Trump that said that, there was a phone call between PM Modi and Trump. Many experts are saying it's pressure tactic. If you can help us dissect and understand what exactly and how do we read this whole, the conversations and, what is going on right now?
Well, thanks very much for having me. I think you have to understand that this president, President Trump, is not into building relationships. He is not into a strategic plan. What he's into is a real estate type transaction in which there is a winner and a loser, and he's going to come out as the winner. Now, the idea that the deal cratered just because a phone call wasn't made is absurd. The record is that there were 8 phone calls and there has been plenty of contact. But what is true about this is that the president views this as a necessity for him to come out as the winner. I can remember back in Trump 1.0, we were very close to a free trade agreement between U.S. and India. And at the last moment, it didn't go forward because President Trump didn't think that the time was right. Also, my understanding is that there have been 2 or 3 times already in Trump 2.0 when a deal has been signed off on by those who are negotiating it on both sides and presented to Trump and not signed because he wants to have leverage to come out in a transaction in which he's the winner. Most recently, he has said that it was necessary for Prime Minister Modi to please him in regard to the sanctions with Russia. Well, the concept that he has to be pleased as opposed to establishing a strategic relationship between the United States and India, the 2 greatest democracies on earth, I would argue, is absurd. But that's the mentality of our president. It's a real estate transaction. There's going to be a winner and a loser, and he's going to come out as the winner. And if he doesn't, he'll just move on to something else and claim victory in another sphere. It's a very disconcerting situation, but this is the one which we have to deal with if we are to maintain the relationship which we have built over the last 30, 35 years between these 2 great democracies.
Definitely a point taken. I want to come to you, Vivek, for that. Now, as far as the comments which has been made by Lutnick, actually India has missed the bus, or you think once again it is just a pressure tactic?
Yeah, I think we've come a full circle from the fact that, there was a phase in India-US relationship, India-US negotiations, particularly on the trade deal, when we were talking about, India's willingness to do this trade deal. And I think that was put out pretty starkly on the table, that India is willing to do, not just willing to do the trade deal, but also putting on the table more concessions than before, minus the retaliatory intention that we had in the first Trump administration. So I think the intentions and the political will from our side hasn't been more clear than now. I think what is happening really is the attack dogs of the United States is President, the Lutniks, the the Kushners have again come forward because there is a kind of frustration in the United States on why certain red lines remain in place from India's position. And I think that's going to be irking to any administration, but particularly to an administration which has such a fragile ego. So I think that's going to be a sticking point. Now, the third point is, of course, where do you go from here? I think from here, there are at least two ways in which this could go. One is, of course, for one, I would imagine that the deal is on the table. To say that there is a layered structure in which this deal would happen on a first come, first serve basis may be a choice for the United States, but may not necessarily be something that reflects with the recipient country. And I think recipient countries as sovereign nations will take their own interests in accord when they take their decisions, and that will define the time in terms of where they want to position themselves and how they want to position themselves on the spectrum of negotiation. So I think what is happening right now is that India has outlined a pretty strong willingness to do this deal, minus some of the red lines that we have outlined pretty starkly. But there are very, very intransigent demands from the United States, which I don't think the India is willing to sort of accommodate at this point, but probably could accommodate in the future. But I think that is where it's sort of stuck up at this point.
Yeah.
But we are dealing with an administration that is pretty adamant, and so that has to be factored in as well.
Absolutely. At this point, also let's take in, Raymond Vickery's comments on this. You had previously described India's stance as good and disciplined. Does Howard Lutnick's recent, characterization of India's position and also the train leaving the station analogy that he spoke about suggest a fundamental shift in, let's say, U.S. administration's diplomatic approach towards New Delhi?
Well, I think that what you see with Mr. Lutnick, Secretary Lutnick, in his recent comments, is a trying to emulate his boss in terms of a good reality TV approach. He's in an interview. He wants to be able to do something which is eye-catching, ear-catching. And so he throws out this business of, well, it was just because the call wasn't made. I had it all set up. I'm the great man, just as my boss is a great man. And it's all somebody else's fault that this didn't go through. This is just really an absurd way to conduct international relations. It's really not reflective of what has happened in professional circles in the government in past trade negotiations. But as one of your headlines is showing on the screen, the real wild card in all of this is what the United States Supreme Court is going to do today. The entire legal basis for the Trump action, particularly on the so-called Liberation Day tariffs, is very, very shaky and unsure. And it seems to me that this decision on the U.S.-India tariff relationship is going to be very much affected by what's announced just in a couple of hours here in the United States. Then we're going to have a new reality to deal with, and it will be not just a question of ego or reality TV, but really the underlying legal basis from the United States. So at this point, I think what Mr. Lutnick said can be pretty well discounted, and you have to stay the course and try to work our way around this difficulty. The United States and India have had difficulty in the past. I've been a part of it on the testing of nuclear weapons. We've not nuclear weapons, but nuclear transactions, and we've been able to work through these, and we can do it again. but it's not going to be done on the basis of what makes good TV at the time.
Point taken, Mr. Vikri. One more comment which has caught the limelight per se is the 3 Friday deadline. On one hand, India is saying that there were 8 calls which were made between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President. But on the other hand, Mr. Lutnick was mentioning that he did not call President. Which version is true?
Well, I think the Indian version is true. The record is plain that there have been calls back and forth. There are calls on a birthday greeting. There's no problem in terms of picking up the phone. What is being done here is, as I have said, is the Secretary of Commerce, instead of looking at this as a relationship sort of process, is trying to emulate his boss, make good TV, and have coming out on top in a transaction. This is no way to run a railroad or an international relationship, and I predict that saner heads are going to prevail on both sides, and we'll come to some sort of agreement. But it's not going to be done on basis, well, you didn't make a phone call at this time. It's going to be on other bases, and part of that basis, of course, is the ego of our president. It'll have to be taken into account, but I think India is perfectly capable of working its way around such a problem.
And, I want to speak to him, if this 500% tariff bill indeed passes, what reciprocal measures should India actually take, and how severely would it damage that, doubling of the bilateral, trade by 2030? Vivek Mishra?
Oh, sorry. So 500 tariffs. Let's be clear. I mean, if it goes through, it's going to be stinging. But the fact is that I think a commodity like fuel finds its own market, and I think the needs will define a new supply chain in the long term. But the fact is that there is an ecosystem that is working in alignment with everything else that is happening in India-US relations. For example, you have Sergio Gore heading to India to take over as Indian ambassador. And I presume that this is a theatrics around that to create an amount of passive-aggressive environment to ask India to sort of cede more ground in terms of negotiations. But my assumption is that I think we have ceded enough grounds already in terms of negotiations and where we want to go with this. But, can we go further on certain red lines is a question that I think is best left to the government. But at this point, in India-US relations, if you also count the other aspects beyond the rhetoric of Lutnick and other in the Trump administration, I think there is a certain continuity in relationship that remains. And there is a strategic part of dialogue that I think both the State Department and the MEA here engages with on a weekly or a monthly basis still. So I think the rubrics of the relationship remain intact. And we have to bypass this difficult phase in terms of where the economics of this relationship really fall on so that the broader momentum of this relationship is secured.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Mishra, and thank you so much, Raymond Vickery, for joining us for this conversation, sharing your inputs. Some really, interesting points made, including the real estate kind of approach, the reality TV kind of an approach to trade negotiations. It's like Apprentice that we are watching in real life. Indeed, Uncle.
Definitely. And we'll definitely get to know that whether or not India has missed the trade bus or refused to board a bad trade deal. But with this, it's time to take a very quick break. After the break, a lot coming up.